come on up.
Great to be back.
All right, yeah, and I forgot to mention, he has a quick slideshow he's going to go through and talk about, not slideshow, a presentation. Okay, let's go do that.
So
first.
we're going to do a conversation, but I thought, how many heard me here about a year and a half ago? A few of you, okay. So, I'm a bit of I'm a physician, scientist type, but also have some medical device experience. But often I'm sort of asked to sort of, share what the future of health and medicine is and how that relates to the medical device industry and beyond. I thought I'd just start off with a bit of a quick survey. I'm going to go really quick that might inform our conversation a bit more and just sort of get up to speed with some of the things that are happening, convergently in the touch medical devices and beyond. And hopefully we're entering a future of healthcare that's smarter, more intelligent, more connected, more democratized. And, it's an exciting time to think about, creating the future of healthcare and shifting it from sort of where we've been, a sort of reactive sick care model, very much based on intermittent data, to one that's much more continuous, data-driven, personalized, crowdsourced, and upskilled, right? Whether you're an inventor, a clinician, a regulatory person, we're all being upskilled today. I just a few minutes ago asked to help me do some art with DALL-E 3, and I said, design some images about the future of medical devices, and it came up with this in about 1 minute, So we all can be upskilled in this new era, and of course, you've already been talking about AI. ChatGPT 4 is here, soon ChatGPT 5 will be here. It's moving super quickly, faster, it's been less than a year since ChatGPT 3 came out. How many people have tried it personally? Almost everybody, right? So you can go on the. I asked it, protect your medical device maker, and how do you get FDA approval? And it kind of went through all the steps. And then if you don't get FDA approval, what do you do next? It even gave me some little hints. So it's getting faster. I know there's going to be Guru GPT pretty soon plugged in. And I asked it even to do a diagram of explain the FDA 510(k) process. This is what it came up with, which is a little bit wonky, but it's probably illustrative of how complex some of these things are. And why you guys need the help of great organizations like Greenlight. But there's still challenges. It's still early days. AI and all these other technologies aren't perfect yet. They have biases. They're not always exactly where we want them to be. But it's still early days. And just some examples. What I think the low-hanging fruit is, it's not yet building the whole pill and telling you exactly what to do as a clinician or as a patient, but getting rid of some of the scut work, right? The ease of making your appointments and reminders, and instead of burnout for clinicians like me talking and scribing, it's going to do automatic scribing. So those are sort of the early elements. But if you look forward a few years, I think we'll sort of enter an element of generative health, where each of us can have a sort of AI-built environment for each of us and our patients and our communities and companies that really match our age, our culture, our language, as opposed to sort of being one size fits all, as many elements are. So disruption is coming quickly, right? It's moving faster than the regulatory world or the reimbursement world, and it's hard to keep up. But it's part of our opportunity as healthcare innovators to sort of try to ride that curve going forward. Ride that sort of acceleration of many technologies. Some are obviously in the device side, some are the data side. And what's exciting, I think, now is all of us who are thinking about healthcare is to look at that blend between healthcare and technology, and now these whole new fields that have been developed, in the 20 years since I've been a Stanford medical student. Now we have software as a medical device, and computational biology, and gene editing, and virtual reality, all of which are becoming almost magical in their capabilities. It does still take a while, often longer than we want, to get these things to market, but I want to sort of stimulate your thoughts into, what's the art of the possible, because, while the last 10 years were pretty exciting in healthcare, the next 10 years, as catalyzed by the pandemic as well, are going to be even more exciting. So I like to think about solving pain points. My little medical device story is when I was doing my bone marrow transplant fellowship at Stanford. I was part of the very first year of Stanford Biodesign, which many of you know is a real sort of engine around medical device innovation. And my pain point was harvesting bone marrow. I thought, this is kind of kludgy. We've done it the same way for 50 years, putting a needle in someone's rear end about 50 times to pull about a liter of bone marrow out. And so I somehow imagined a little sort of rotor-rooter for harvesting marrow and invented a device instead of doing multiple punctures to do sort of a curving, flexible, powered shaft. And to make a long story short, got that developed, started a company, got it FDA cleared, 510(k) pathway. Here's our very first early versions of the device. And now we're working with patients to get up bone marrow for bone marrow transplant, for regenerative medicine procedures, for orthobiologics. And Thursday, I'm going up to the University of Washington. They're interested in using the device not to harvest bone marrow, but to deliver genes into the marrow cavity. Maybe it's a new way of doing gene therapy. So a medical device reversing its approach for not harvest as you're seeing here, but for delivery. So I've been through a little bit of the device process. It's still in the midst of doing it, but it's an interesting journey, and we're hopefully going to make a difference with this technology. So while the device world sometimes feels, and healthcare can feel a bit incremental, I think the future of health medicine is hopefully a bit more exponential. I think moving quickly. I mean, many of us grew up with these sort of technologies, and now they're all dissolved and appified. You know, you don't buy a video camera or a GPS anymore. It's almost a free add-on to your portable device. Quantum computing is coming next. I think that's going to play a really interesting role across healthcare, from understanding your digital biomarkers and your genomics to maybe helping your design control and running simulations of medical trials before we actually go into animals, into humans. I've sort of played a role looking at this convergence of technology for like 12, 13 years. I chair medicine for something called Singularity University. I built and run a program called Exponential Medicine. Now it's called Next Med Health. So every fall we get together at the Hotel del Coronado and we bring people out of their silos, from medical device to pharma to patients to investors to technologists to folks doing anything from drones to chatbots to psychedelics, and kind of learn about what's now near next. And I think that's my encouragement for all of you in the medical device world, is to sort of get outside of the sometimes the medical device silo and see what's the art of the possible, because that can stimulate lots of new thinking and progress. And I love this quote shared by the head of innovation from NHS, who was with us this year. Difficulty lies not in the new ideas, but in escaping from the old ones. And of course, some of our regulatory friends have old ideas, and we're stuck in some of the challenges and old silos. But we need to all sort of help all ships rise if we're going to move into this new era of healthcare. And some of it is sometimes the user interface, right? 15 years ago, we weren't driving with Uber. Now we want to press a button and get what you want when you want it, and whether it's your Uber to take back to the airport, or to deliver a vaccine, or your drugs, or a phlebotomist. We're even seeing, you can press a button and have a drone deliver a defibrillator, which was published last year. And I think in Sweden. So that's med device meets press of a button meets delivery. And if you're not thinking about these exponentials, you can be the next Blockbuster or the next Kodak. Kodak actually invented digital photography, but didn't want to cut into their film sales, and they went kind of bust the same year Instagram was built and sold for a few $1 billion by 12 kids down the street from me in Palo Alto. So summary is, you want to be Ubering yourself before you get Kodak, as sort of a takeaway in terms of your meta thinking. So there's all sorts of new tools that are integrating, I think, with the medical device world. Part of it is how we can see our data and insights. Obviously, augmented, virtual, extended reality. I still have my antique Google glasses here. They don't work very well, but they were kind of amazing 10 years ago. Now they're old school. These technologies aren't perfect. They're not cheap at the beginning, but of course, we're starting to see these dissolve into our glasses, whether it's from Meta or the soon-to-be arriving Vision from Apple. Those are going to have lots of applications for healthcare and medical devices, but it's going to be increasingly bringing data and insights into the operating room. It's going to start guiding clinicians step by step with their medical devices, with imaging, crowdsourcing knowledge from thousands of surgeries. We heard earlier that the last person to graduate from medical school is still called doctor. 50% of surgeons are below average, and this can help upskill folks along the way. Sort of blending all the ability now sort of see inside the body and gain insights is going to be blending with all our implants and hopefully making procedures faster, cheaper, and safer. And of course, for medical education, when you're trying to educate a design engineer or a medical student, or how someone's going to use a new device in terms of a cardiac procedure, et cetera, these can really be new tools to sort of understand anatomy, procedures, devices, and increasingly, we're not going to train as see one, do one, teach one. We're going to be see one and simulate, whether that's the trial or training, clinicians new devices, even in a crowdsourced collaborative way. So it's an exciting time to bring these new technologies together. And increasingly, I think, as one surgeon or one team has their own experience, we're going to start to see procedures guided step by step. Again, learning from thousands of procedures. A couple companies, one called Theater, that's videoing procedures, for example. And just like our modern cars are kind of upskilling our driving, we're going to sort of go from driver assist to clinician assist in many settings. I'm a pilot. I love lessons from aviation. We have sort of augmented reality in the cockpit and fighter jets, which I spent a lot of time in as a flight surgeon. We also can see the shift in the world, kind of from the analog world of, I learned to fly in a Cessna 150 with, paper maps and round dials. Now I'm flying a little two-seater with a touchscreen cockpit with, real-time updated maps and traffic and information about the airports and the weather. We have situational awareness. That, I think, is something that can come to the healthcare world and medical device world writ large. Whether you're in trials or post-market, kind of you get a map of what's happening in real time, not waiting to do it in analog ways. Diagnostics, of course, is blended and important in the device world. 10 years ago, we had the first examples of EKG on the back of a smartphone. Now you on CNN or you go on Amazon, you can buy your own 6-lead EKG or one that fits on a credit card, and that can screen for AFib or other cardiac issues. So those are becoming cheap, and home diagnostics, particularly through COVID, have been accelerated. I'm wearing this device, CE marked one, not FDA cleared. It does blood pressure in real time. You calibrate it once with an old-fashioned blood pressure cuff, and it gives you real-time blood pressure. And I think generation wearables, whether it's a Fitbit or an Apple Watch, will have real-time blood pressure and blood sugar in the next couple of years. That's going to give us tremendous opportunities to monitor our own health and our patients with continuous data, not reactive siloed data. And you don't even need a wearable device. Wear device now. Cameras now can pick up heart rate, blood pressure, oxygen saturation. These will be embedded in our phones and our cameras. And speaking of the medical selfie, you can also now see I'm on the board of this Israeli company. It's really a medical device meets AI company. You just dip your urine dipstick, take a picture with your camera, and it's now FDA cleared, and it can give you your urinalysis results, easy peasy. So that's an example of, it took a long time to get to the FDA. It was quite delayed, but now is rolling out across the US to screen, for example, diabetics for their renal function, find problems before they have need a kidney transplant. And then, of course, the wearables and otherwables are now able to move from consumer side to medical, and many of them are going through the FDA process. Like this one is not yet through it, but it will enable us to do smarter ways to pick up all sorts of physiology. We're seeing little patches now that give us an ICU level of data, streaming basically what you get in an ICU anywhere you might be with connectivity, and that's going to change how we monitor devices, monitor health in a continuous manner. There's other fun things coming that are device meets diagnostic wearables that don't just are hearing aids, but measure blood flow and can provide guidance back to the patient. Ingestibles, sort of swallowable Fitbits and go through your GI tract. Sweatables that will measure the health of a cardiovascular patient or a renal patient or a triathlete. Underwearables are a fun one. You get a pack of 10 of these, or packed in, I'll show you mine. But they can basically now, with the new regulatory, follow where the money goes, with the new regulatory for remote patient monitoring, you can remotely monitor COPD patients. Wearables are going in other directions now. This one is about to get launched, Hypershell, and it's going to enable all of us to walk faster, climb, and carry more. And there's other examples for folks who are paralyzed or have muscle weakness that are kind of blending device and exoskeletons. Is getting exciting. So I think the next 10 years are going to see the blending of all these sort of wearables, otherwables, data to give us, proactive predictive analytics and become sort of a health as a service and a sort of blended with AI, machine learning, let us interface with that in proactive ways. Imaging is certainly getting interesting. The devices are going to get smaller. I think in a decade, you'll go to your corner Walgreens or CVS or Minute Clinic and get a full body scan read by the AI radiologist. Some of these devices are getting smaller, portable MRIs or even wearable MRIs, essentially. This is in trials now that can pick up strokes and brain tumors just from a headband. So watch how small and hopefully democratized diagnostics can get. This is I'm showing us a picture of lots of medical devices I can usually fit in my pocket. I didn't bring them all today, but what's interesting about these is that means you can bring them almost anywhere in the world. It could be rural California to rural Rwanda, and that's going to help democratize and bring diagnostics and devices to many parts of the world, now which 5G is coming through our satellites. Whole new markets are opening up in the global healthcare sense for devices tied to data, tied to AI, tied to insights. And of course, it's not going to be human versus machine. It's when we kind of blend our abilities, the idea of collaboration, that we're going to do the best, and even collaboration with robotics. These are a company called Sanctuary AI. They're playing with healthcare applications. The robotics are now human dexterity, and they're going to become more automated and can replace a phlebotomist in some cases. Just watch that blending. This is moving very, 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 very quickly. And it's really, med device meets AI. And finally, a lot of this is coming together through this world of what's often called, digital health, the ability to take data from our wearables, devices, implantables, and make sense of them, or prescribe an app or a device or a platform that's going to blend with your device or your drug, or sometimes just be the device itself, the app itself, like an app for smoking cessation, or FDA-cleared apps that can treat ADHD as opposed with a video game. Where this is sort of all heading is all these new devices and tools that are becoming software as medical device, some FDA cleared, some not, is to flow the data continuously to our healthcare systems and our clinicians so we can measure health and wellness and optimize health span, to diagnose diseases early based on your digital biomarkers, and then to hopefully be smarter feedback loops in therapy, right? It doesn't need to be a implanted deep brain stimulation device or a pacemaker. It can be sometimes smaller devices that can give us insights into care. And as we move from hospital to home, it might be aging in place. All these new connected devices hopefully can seamlessly work into the workflow of the clinician to make sense of them and give us a form of almost predictalytics. Who's going to get in trouble, and understanding that beforehand based on the synthesis of lots of data streams, kind of this idea of a digital twin for each of us and our patients. There's a lot already out there. I've had trouble keeping up. 10 years ago, there's a Fitbit and a couple other wearables. Now there's thousands of devices. So I've recently launched a platform. I'd love you to all try out. It's called digital.health. That's the website. And if you go there, you can look at now, I think, 3,000 different devices and apps and solutions. So if you search, for example, diagnostics, and you can learn about that AliveCore EKG device and what it's able to do, and its FDA pathway, and its evidence base, and you can put it in your own formulary or prescribe it to a patient. So it's a good exploration platform. So please try it out and add your tools and technologies and innovations there as well. All this is great. The problem is these new devices and technologies create lots of data, as you know, and data by itself is not very exciting when it's siloed and can't connect. We don't just want data. We want the insights and the information, and then go from information to useful insights that we can use at the clinic or the bedside or the website. And so there's a big need to narrow that gap, how long it takes to get a device through trials and to get approved, and then for clinicians to know about it and to get paid for it, and for patients to demand their use when it can make a difference. So there's a big opportunity to narrow that gap, I think, using AI, machine learning, and the software from Greenlight and those of your knowledge bases. And finally, I think where this gets interesting is back to this idea of crowdsourcing. We used to drive with paper maps. Remember that? Now it would be hard to imagine getting back to the airport without using Google Maps or Waze. Now we can think about building a Google Maps or Waze for healthcare, where we're each sort of sharing information and building that map for our healthcare and medical pathways. And so my hope is for the future of health and medicine and med devices is we're going to move from our era of intermittent reactive sick care, where we wait for data to be collected in the four walls of the clinic, to one that's continuous, much more proactive, where we can bring care anywhere and hopefully bring better outcomes at lower costs and democratize that around the planet. And again, a lot of that shifting from hospital to home, hospital to hospital. So lots of opportunity for the medical device world to bring these technologies almost anywhere, and then enable us to interact with them through these smart chatbots that are going to know our medical history and our genomics and other information. And we won't just be interacting with clinicians on a FaceTime video or face-to-face. We're going to enter the mediverse, the medverse, right? Where we're going to have new ways of turning each of us into an avatar or a chatbot and interact in interesting ways. And if you haven't seen the interview with Lex Friedman and Zuckerberg, where they're in VR headsets and they feel in the same room, it's a pretty powerful shift of how we're going to interact in new ways and collaborate. And I'll leave you with my area of favorite blending of convergent technology and medical devices is 3D printing, right? That's taken a while to come to the fore. Now we have 3D printed braces and medical implants and orthopedic devices. I've been thinking that through the lens of medication. I'm a pediatric hematologist oncologist. We treat a lot of patients with lots of meds. Many older adults take 7 or 20 meds a day, and it's the wrong doses, and they have to cut them in half, or they're overdosing or they're underdosing. So I've been thinking about a 3D print personalized polypill. So I've been developing a little technology in telemedicine. So where you start with generic drugs, put it in essentially one tablet, print it at a central pharmacy, or eventually at your corner pharmacy, or eventually at your home, and enable you to sort of print your medication on demand with the doses that you need that might adjust each day. So I built a little prototype. It's got the IP issued, and hopefully in the next decade you'll see, with the help of regulatory folks and others, this get to market if we can figure out the compounding landscape. So it's an exciting health age that we have upon us. I encourage all of you to be thinking about, not just any one technology set, but where all these things are moving, from AR and VR and sensors and big data and 3D printing and nanotech and genomics, and how they come together to enable us to build a better healthcare world, leveraging medical devices and your knowledge and insight to bring care for all of us anywhere, anytime. So with that, thanks for the preamble, and looking forward to the discussion. Thanks.
Daniel Kraft. My dad told me a long time ago, don't ever be the smartest person in the room. So, checked. Thanks for being with us, Daniel.
It's great to be with you.
I love the introduction. As depth as it was awesome. So, in this room, we have a lot of medtech professionals. And as we're going through this, I'm thinking to myself, okay, there's been a lot of technology working in parallel. We had all of the wearable technology. We had all that artificial intelligence that's coming up. And it seems like there's going to be a convergence of technology. And when I think about the people in this room, why do I need to know about this? One of the things that I think about is the ecosystem that your device is going to live in. Can you speak a little bit to that and the culture that it takes to accept those things?
Yeah, I think this convergence of devices, insights, data to knowledge. And we're both wearing an Aura ring, right? I don't know. My sleep score last night was not great. Stayed up too late last night. That's one piece of information that's sort of simplified. It's taking your REM and your deep sleep and your light sleep and heart rate variability and gives you a score for your sleep and maybe your activity level for the day and what you might want to achieve. That's one piece of data. That's something we can look at ourselves. But our health is not just our digital biomarkers. It could be from our voice as a biomarker, which I just saw a study today from some colleagues that voice can pick up not just whether you might have early signs of Alzheimer's or mental health challenges, or if that cough is COVID or croup or a cold. It can also pick up blood sugar levels and might screen for diabetes. So big picture for folks in the medtech world, you need to think about how your technology, whether it's a consumer device or an implanted device or something that's just in the OR or helps a nurse on rounds, ties in, and that isn't just something charted and filed away for regulatory or billing purposes. Because the interesting world is going to be making sense of this, and this AI, big data, machine learning piece, the super convergence of data into insights is really going to hopefully change the game and help us pick up problems earlier, identify patients and new markets earlier, and give us new knowledge that can, like as I mentioned, go from data to insights to knowledge in less than the usual 17-year gap.
Yeah, just from a regulatory standpoint, when I think about design controls and setting the specifications for your medical device, that seems like that's going to become one of the user needs, just understanding already is really, knowing who's going to use the device from a broad spectrum. What do you think about the culture of healthcare right now and accepting those things from a patient perspective? Because I look at this and I say, well, one of the challenges, though, is in utilizing all of this technology is transferring it to my doctor and making them actually listen or see that data.
Yeah, there's a big gap between what's already here, the future's already here, not evenly distributed, and it being utilized. And also, I was just this morning at a TED AI conference in San Francisco, and part of the theme now is a lot of these new tools are quite magical, but the data is often not representative. We had a young doctor from England speak at my conference, and they found, and others have, that, for example, some med devices for pulse oximetry don't work on African Americans, or the average population measured in the Framingham studies aren't really representative of many parts of the country or the world. So that's one piece, is how we can understand our patients and model devices, tools, software that is much more adaptable, and not for the average patient, because very few folks are average. And then back to your question about clinicians using these tools, it always comes down to, once you get through the regulatory barriers, two other ones. One is workflow, and many of us are stuck on Epic, Epic fail, I like to call it, which is not really aligned with, it's aligned with billing, but not necessarily care. And then number two, the incentives. Are you going to be incentivized to give that patient a connected blood pressure cuff on their watch? Because most clinicians, nurses, pharmacists don't want to look at every blood pressure. They want to smartly see the 20 patients of their 2,000 that are 20 points too high, and hopefully have the chatbot give them a nudge and adjust their blood pressure meds, for example, and they get paid for that and rewarded. So workflow is key, incentives are key, and that's different in many different healthcare systems, fee-for-service versus value-based, et cetera.
So apologies if you're in sales earlier. I didn't mean to insult anyone as far as that goes, but educating your sales force sounds like it's going to be really important as well. And just understanding how those things are going to be reimbursed for. Absolutely.
And education, whether it's for a medical student or a medical device professional, it's shifting, right? We all entered this virtual world through the pandemic. Many sales reps and others visited virtually, and the ability now to use VR and AR and new ways of interacting in a social and educational environment can really change the game. When you see a medical device and it's not physically there, but you can play with it and you can see how it fits into the heart and how to train someone on it, I think can really accelerate knowledge and utility and then the safety and efficacy.
So you have a medical device company, or you worked on the Roto-Rooter before?
The Marrow Miner.
The Marrow Miner. Yeah, that was your idea from Roto-Rooter, is that right?
Right.
Okay, well, what were some of the roadblocks you saw as regulatory frameworks that this just doesn't make sense? Does anything stand out in your history, whether it's regulatory or just the pathway to market in general? Anything stand out?
Well, what stood out is I was lucky to go through the Stanford Biodesign program, which was a blend of medical device entrepreneurs, physicians, folks for the business school and the law school, and we were learning from folks who'd been through it, who'd built Medtronic and invented the first stents. And so there was a bit of a culture of collaboration and mentoring. So that was one, and I worked with some smart medical device engineers who'd been through it a few times and knew how to file the 510(k), and we got it right away on the right sort of predicate. So that's one thing, is just to learn and collaborate and not reinvent the wheel. And I think, with platforms like Greenlight, you can do that, and learn from your crowdsourced knowledge and software, so you're not making those same mistakes. Just like I wouldn't do my taxes by myself. I mean, I could try. It would take a lot longer, and I'd probably make mistakes. It's now somewhat guided and software enabled, and increasingly will be AI enhanced and crowdsourced. Where do folks make mistakes? And imagine in the regulatory world, we'll almost be able to simulate what's going to get through or not get through, and tweak that early on.
You mentioned the Guru GPT, and so that's the digital guru is what we're calling it. I believe it's in beta testing right now. So definitely check that out on greenlight.guru if you want to check that out. If you want to learn more about what we was talking about there. The regulatory, maybe moving away from the regulatory pathway, but you mentioned a little bit about the 3D printed poly pill. It was pretty fun to say. Tell me a little bit about your process in coming up with that idea, pursuing it as an idea. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
It goes back about a decade. I was actually in Cambridge at a longevity conference. I'm not one of those longevity freaks, but it was an interesting conference on future of aging. And they're talking about rapamycin and metformin. You've heard of some of these drugs being used off-label to maybe extend your lifespan. And I thought, I bet you, just like precision personalized medicine, we might need different doses of statin and aspirin and blood pressure meds and others, that our longevity cocktails might be different in the future. We might want a way to make it easy to take. And I learned about a trial in India called the Polycap trial. A lot of Indian men particularly have a very high risk of cardiovascular disease. And so they did a trial on Indian men who were middle-aged, whose father or brother died young from a heart attack or stroke, and they gave them a poly pill that was half-dose aspirin, statin, beta blocker, and ACE inhibitor. And their event rates went down by 80%. And that was kind of a one-size-fits-all poly pill. I thought, well, what if we could truly personalize that to treat common diseases like heart disease, hypertension? And that's where the idea popped into my head. And I remember watching, as some of you remember those ads as a kid of the contact cold pill, and they'd open it up, all little balls would fall out, and they'd bounce around. You guys, some of you remember that? Old enough to remember that? I thought, what if you just reverse that? And I'd spent time in the lab doing stem cell biology with flow cytometer, where you sort things. And I thought, what if we just sorted little marbles of little micropills? And that was where the idea for telemedicine came from, sort of a blending of ideas and seeing a pain point, and having dealt with many patients who can't take their meds very well. We know that 50% of patients don't take their medicines as prescribed at all, and a lot of adverse drug reactions come because grandma gets the same dose of a blood pressure med as a 300-pound lineman. So
one of the things that really stands out when you're talking about that is falling in love with the problem and not the solution. As whether if 3D printed poly pill makes sense, but you really know a lot about the problem itself, and that's huge.
Well, we see particularly where I come from in Silicon Valley, a lot of tech folks are getting into healthcare, but they often forget to pull in patients or physicians until it's kind of late. So that's one lesson, is get patients included and clinicians, because sometimes you might have the best solution, but it's not going to be used because the charge nurse doesn't like it, or it doesn't fit a certain population, or there's some other UI issue. And so I think there is something about not falling in love with the problem, but solutioning. And one of my hats I wear, some of you might have heard of X Prize. So like 14 years ago, the first X Prize was won to get the first non-NASA rocket into space. It was won by Burt Rutan and his team. Now it's Virgin Galactic is flying people to space on the next version of that. But that opened up the space world, and it was a prize to get a rocket with carrying 3 people to 100 kilometers and do that twice in a week. So it set an audacious but challenging but possible to achieve goal. And in terms of solutioning, we're now building new X Prizes. I came up with one for medical tricorder X Prize, which was it got a lot of medical device folks to collaborate and converge on building like from Star Trek, a device that might be able to give you home-based diagnostics. During the pandemic, I helped run and put together a rapid COVID testing X Prize, really kind of a med device meets diagnostics prize. If you remember in 2020, 21, getting COVID tests was days and PCR tests and lines and lots of mortality, morbidity. So we put out a challenge to build smarter, faster, cheaper COVID tests, and we ended up with 717 from 70 countries. And some of them are really creative. Some of them have gone through the regulatory process. They're in market today. Some are breath-based. One was a smell-based card, super cheap. So smell was going away. You could quantify that with an app. So I think as you guys are even thinking in your own companies, you can think about running little challenges. So don't need to be a full-on X Prize. Like crowdsource your company and your teams to go after hard problems, and it comes up with some surprising solutions. Specifically when you solve for problems not with just the technology of today, but what's going to come next, the $10 genome, the ChatGPT 7, the 3D printed in your home.
Yeah, that's one of the things that stands out to me. Every time I hear you talk or talk to you, is the lateral thinking. And you mentioned your flight experience, all those things. A lot of different industries draw from different other industries. And I think that's really valuable to point that out. Can you go into a little bit more, I don't know, can you give some advice as how to explore and utilize that lateral thinking?
Well, one is, so one of my colleagues who helped start Singularity University wrote this great book called Exponential Organizations by Salim Ismail. The second version of it is out, which means we need not just need to be exponential thinkers, thinking about what's coming next as things accelerate with Moore's law, but to look at these convergences like it's on that slide. And many of us get very smart about our particular niche, device element, a drug, a clinical specialty, and I think the magic happens when you get mixed people from different fields. And so one thing to do is follow different people on Twitter or whatever it's called now, X, that are from different realms. Have brown bag lunches where you bring people in from outside the medical device industry. Video games are becoming medical devices. I have a colleague, I have a small venture fund. We just funded a company called Deep Wealth Digital Therapeutics, started by one of the gurus of the video game world and a medical device guy who's figured out a way to take video games and get them FDA cleared and blend that with video games at scale for managing mental health. And it's going to launch in January on Oculus. So sometimes you can learn from other fields, and many times the folks who are gamifying, buying things can learn how to make you gamify your device adherence or your design or the user interface.
One of the books that comes to mind when you were talking through that was I don't know if you've heard of Checklist Manifesto, but I think it's Atul Gawande. He talks about just a lot of the different things that you're talking about, adhering to these things across industries. I want to take your advice about listening to your users, so I want to ask the audience what questions they have for you, because I want to make sure we're fitting the art. Does anybody here have a question for Daniel?
Or a challenge?
We'll cross-examine the witness. Yes.
Yeah, I have a question. A lot of the problem within medical health is getting the doctors to move up, and just like I'm a pilot, with the airplane, when we went from the steam gauges to the computers,
Right,
and the glass screen, a lot of pilots have a really difficult time, making that transition. I'm in obstetrics GYN, and in that world, doctors don't want to change.
Yeah.
So we're doing procedures the same as they were done almost 200 years ago, 300 years ago. All that technology has changed. The reluctance keeps that from women's health.
Yeah.
All the great things in women's health.
Yeah, some of it's a bit generational. It's like the new pilots grew up on Garmin GPS, and many of us had to transition. So there's now the digital divide. The digital natives are on medical school now, and the medical device folks in grad school are going to have a bit of a different mindset and use different tools and have their brains wired differently. So, but there is that challenge, and of course, some fields like the interventional cardiologists are the cowboys, but the OB-GYNs are traditionally the most conservative, partly because of the medical legal elements, partly because of the culture, and so sometimes it takes leadership and folks who are willing to try something differently, or sometimes it leapfrogs the U.S. where there's unmet need and you don't have enough OB-GYNs or high-risk OBs, et cetera. They're leveraging tools that wouldn't be approved here, and we're going to learn from what happens in rural Rwanda and bring it back here. That's happening in some places, but it is, have to sometimes, we're starting to see some of the, I went to the American College of Cardiology 15 years ago and gave the first talk on digital health. Now they have their own digital health section and digital health leadership, and so sometimes it takes the right folks from the top building it in, and also getting folks to try these solutions when they're easier. Like there's lots of apps in femtech now, from everything from managing menopause to AI-based colposcopy that will do a pap smear that is sort of less risk. And so you get folks trying these things before you're doing an AI-enabled C-section, and that might be part of that curve, and adoption can be sped up. But definitely a culture challenge, and Yeah, one of the teams that came out of Singular University is doing basically a pad, and you can take the menstrual flow and send it in the mail and have your PAP done that way. So there's all sorts of new ways and technologies as we blend, what used to be analog under, digital pathology, for example, is now molecular, and that impacts a lot of devices in diagnostics.
Gentleman in the back. Yeah. Yeah.
You mentioned the integration of many different disciplines into that, and then you also mentioned Silicon Valley. So one of my concerns always happens is, you take the culture of move fast, break things, and you put it into healthcare. We obviously saw what happened with the highest kind of Theranos sort of example. How do you move at a pace of innovation without, spoiling the water?
Yeah, I mean,
That's the biggest challenge.
right. You can't move fast and break things, and software for a social media network can launch every day, or an app can update, but obviously that's not the same pathway for medical elements. And of course, there's been some bad actors which have poisoned the well to some degree. But now we really are in an era where you can take a drop of blood and get multiomics on it at pretty low cost. And not just the genome, but the proteome and the metabolome, and we put those together in this digital twin era, get really interesting. And a lot of the folks who come out of tech, they're tired of just selling ads. They're applying their mindsets to building next generation systems. At the same time, how do you? It might be easier now to. It is easier now to do smarter trials. That finding the drug that's not working or the device that's not working from the era of digital clinical trials. I got COVID right before the vaccine came out, and I was searching around to see what was useful, and I guess the cookies were good, because on Facebook an ad popped up, said, have you or someone been diagnosed with COVID? Are you interested in being part of a clinical trial? I'm like, yes. I put the button. 10 minutes later, I got a phone call from the University of Washington. The next day, I had FedEx to me a drug and a connected blood pressure cuff and an app, and it was a drug called fluvoxamine, and old generic SSRI that proved itself out to be quite protective. And I think I was in the active ingredient based on my, but that was an example of sometimes speeding up testing and data and finding both things that work and don't work. But yeah, there's, just like we're challenged now with guardrails around AI, what guardrails can happen in taking medical data, letting it be somewhat shareable, because some rules like HIPAA are well-meaning, but they were built in the pre-digital age, and up-leveling them so we can accelerate healthcare instead of being so slow.
Yeah.
Yes. So I'm seeing the empowered consumer, and I'm seeing citizen science. Can you speak about liability versus ownership of data? Like, who's going to own all this data, and who's going to decide who owns it, who gets to license it to who? Like, it reminds me of remember the story with Bruce Willis and iTunes?
Sure.
He sued them because he owned the music, but it's Apple that owns the music, so he just purchased the rights to it. So it's like a license versus ownership kind of relationship. So who's going to own all this data, and who's going to license it? Who's going to?
Yeah, there's lots of. It's such a challenging space, from the lax cells, from the whole issue about who owned the cells from that woman who didn't know she donated them. That are the basis of doing Henrietta Lacks, right? That's one kind of who owns the rights, and how do you share the information. I think big picture, go back to the Google Maps for Waze example. We're used to driving, we're actually data donors. We drive down the road and we're sharing our mobile phone data, and it builds the map of the traffic around us. You care about the traffic in Orange and LA, not in New York City or San Francisco. And you're getting something back. When you're a data donor, you're going to get some information back because you're sort of sharing microdata. But there are platforms that are awarding some patients or individuals to share their genomics in a blockchain privacy-enabled way and give them some micropayments. So there's new kind of crypto things that folks are trying to enable. I'm not sure if that's going to fly. I think we want to encourage folks to share, because that's where we're going to learn. I'm an oncologist in pediatric oncology. Almost every kid's on a clinical trial. In adult oncology, it's 20%. I think we can improve number one, we've seen the challenges from the pandemic of scientific misinformation, folks not trusting science and healthcare. If we can get folks more engaged and see that by sharing data in a safe, anonymized way and opting in when they want to, having that share button, that they can speed up everything from cancer research to mental health, it'll all help all ships rise. But I think there is an opportunity to maybe build those sharing systems in where you can reward people and institutions for sharing data in smart ways. And there's synthetic data now and ways of doing crypto encryption, so it's getting safer. It'll never be perfect.
So if I am sharing data from my smartphone,
Right.
am I selling the data or am I licensing out the data? Like, what model do you see kind of evolving?
Yeah, I think it needs to be clear. Are you sharing it, and the company's going to take it? Like, if you sit, I mean, some of you might have done 23andMe, right? And deep in the checkbox, it said, well, you're going to be able to anonymously share this data, and they've used that to help develop drugs for Parkinson's and others. But you also heard that it got hacked recently, and who knows what's going to happen to some of that private genetic information. So there's, like anything else, you can use AI for good or for bad. You can 3D print a gun, or you can 3D print a medication. You have to kind of, not go too far in either direction. And even back, speaking of the fears of AI and it eating the world, back in early 70s when the first molecular biology was coming together, a lot of folks wanted to say we can't edit genes, it's playing God. So some smart scientists got together at Asilomar and they built the guidelines for the biotech industry, and now it's saved millions of lives and become a huge industry. So sometimes it's being mindful about how we do data privacy, how we reward sharing, how we collaborate, and also weed out the bad actors like the CRISPR baby guy in China who kind of outed himself, but created a huge sort of tamping down on doing things too fast.
So you think we're going to have to start reading the terms and conditions?
So probably. And also like learning from science fiction. If you haven't seen the movie Gattaca, which is like a 25-year-old movie now, like Ethan Hawke is born and the drop of blood, and he's like, he's going to have 80% chance of this and that. Now you can do that pre-birth, right? And so there's opportunities and challenges. Who gets, who sees your genetic data and might change who you get hired by or what sports you do. There's even an app called that would look at your kids' genomics and pick what sports they might be better at, or what wine you might want to drink. But hopefully the future of taking this data can really enable us to not do the one-size-fits-all screening and everyone gets a mammogram at age 40 and colonoscopy at age 55, and much better risk stratify folks. And on the medical device world, just like precision medicine, not every device or everything works with everybody, and we can hopefully better segment the populations. And just like you can 3D print and personalize a device or an app, that will happen at that blending point.
Mike?
Daniel, are you finding that hospital administrators are being a little bit more open to some of the new technologies as well? Because obviously all these companies are using surgeon champions many times. Sometimes those surgeons are the inventors. What about hospital administrations? Are you seeing them sort of turn the page on actually accepting some of these new technologies?
I'd say yes and no. I mean, some systems like Mayo, which is a big, powerful system. John Halamko is a friend, an MD and health IT guru, is building Mayo platforms. So a lot of hospitals are overwhelmed with every company, every app is coming to them. We can save you lives and time and ER and OR time, but it's fragmented, and everyone wants to do a pilot. So there's death by pilot, just like there can be in medical devices. So I think it depends on some systems. Sometimes like a Kaiser can be more, they're a payer and a player, and so they have aligned incentives. And often the health IT folks are overwhelmed with trying to plug these things in. So it comes back to workflow and then engaging the clinician and then rewarding them for using them in the right form. So follow the money, follow the workflow, and hopefully some systems. There was one, the former, I think, CEO of Geisinger just launched a company where they're going to buy a health system and try and implement all this at scale and do it in smart ways. I know in Israel, which is having a challenging window right now, Clalit is an incredible healthcare system where patients share their data. That's where we learned all our data around the efficacy of the vaccine. So you can see some systems and learn from them and hopefully port them into our very kludgy and disconnected system in the U.S., where, by the way, we're not doing as well compared to other peer countries in terms of outcomes.
Yes.
So there's a lot of data being generated by wearables and all these other activities. A lot of data, as it gets converted into information, what are the consequential ethical issues that come up as people start using the machine learning, artificial, whatever it is, going back to Homo Deus,
Yeah.
Where it's like, now you're going to have computers make ethical decisions on treatments, who lives, who dies,
Yeah.
who,
Well, we're not that far. I mean, there's an ethical conundrum of, the self-driving car, right, which is arguably a better than most drivers who are distracted and texting. And yes, they've had some problems in San Francisco, already launched in some places, but a couple more iterations, and they're going to be better than almost all drivers. But at some point, do they hit that one person, or do they avoid the crowd? There's all those sort of ethical elements. Same thing's going to happen with med devices and robotic surgery, which is already in big models, at least you can do anastomoses, and you can draw the line. The robot will do the surgery part of the. So. I think, to answer your question, which is I can't, is that all this data is hopefully one where we're again, back to that crowdsourcing. There's a company called Theater, after surgical theater. They're filming with video thousands of laparoscopic surgeries, like gallbladder surgeries, and they're learning where folks get into trouble. And so they can almost have that kind of check engine light, slow, go, here's the place where you're about to cut the wrong thing, don't do that, and hopefully ethically guide procedures for better outcomes. And then we're going to have to, at some point, just like being a pilot again, the autopilot can do a better job for almost land the plane in many cases. In some cases, you're going to want the autopilot to be going through the bad weather and making those decisions when our brains can't cognify all these new forms of data and insights. So it's going to be a really interesting few years.
Anyone else?
Well, I'll leave you with that thought in terms of just in terms of how to a lot of these tools and technologies are somewhat here. I mean, you can go on digital.health and search for solutions that might help you or your family members' health problems. Bring them to your doctor and say, hey, why don't you manage my blood pressure with this, off-the-shelf connected blood pressure cuff that you can buy in Best Buy, even if it's not paid for? You might want to start trying it out. As you're thinking about the medical device and regulatory world, think about, what's the pain point? How is it being solved today and not working, and how it might be solved at the convergence of these sorts of different technologies. Sometimes I'll run workshops where we go, what's the problem? It's, grandma not taking her meds, or, the old-fashioned cast after a fracture. Well, what's not working, and how could you solve for that, leveraging new mindsets and technologies that, again, weren't available 5-10 years ago?
I think that's. I'm curious how many wearables you've got on right now. Just one?
Just the Oura Ring, which apparently soon will do stress levels. So we'll see what my stress level is. Yeah. This out of Europe blood pressure thing called Actia. Then the Apple Watch, which is getting more and more capable, and it's a platform, right? People are building different apps on top. One of my favorite ones is called Heart Watch, and it takes your data from now years. I've been wearing an Apple Watch for 5 years. And it looks at your trends from resting heart rate to heart rate variability to sleep time. And now you can see longitudinally where things are. And right now, that doesn't go to your clinician. But soon the AI will be sniffing that out and going, hey, Daniel, your resting heart rate went from 60 while you're to 55 to 70. Something's going on. Maybe you need to go get your gaskets checked. And a small example, early in the pandemic, talking about convergent technology, the gyms were closed. So I used my Oculus and I did 100 days straight, which wasn't smart because I tweaked my knee, of an app called Supernatural. You go into the headset, you're in this beautiful environment, there's music, you're whacking balls and diving and moving, and it's a great workout. And my resting heart rate went down over those 3 months by like 10 points. So it's an example of tracking from a wearable, something that's meaningful over time. And the small data can be useful too. Like you send a patient home from a total hip replacement or total knee surgery, and are they walking more every day based on their Fitbit data? It doesn't need to be FDA cleared. Or are they walking less? That can be a simple bio signal that can help a clinician prevent a fall or a complication. And even your scale, my one is a we things, and it tells me every time I step on them, I'm up half a pound or down a pound, and that small data just keeps me hopefully from overeating the next day if I'm up a pound. So, it can be small data, but longitudinal will be really, really interesting.
I want to see if you can give some advice to maybe the product development or the inventors in the audience. I know we have some founders of companies. One of the things I always love when I go into surgery, and I've been in surprisingly more than I would like to admit, but I always ask, hey, what problems are you facing right before I go under? And I have my notebook. I actually write them in this notebook as I'm going under. And they probably hate me, and they give me my data later. What are some things that you see? I mean, you just give some advice to people who maybe aren't in the ER looking for those problems.
Well, especially for folks early in their career when they have beginner's mind, and you're going, why are we still faxing our information? Like I had my own cardiac study done at Stanford, and I got my results in a CD-ROM. I don't even own a CD-ROM player anymore, so that's like a pain point. Like, so some of it is having that beginner's mind and keeping those ideas in those notebooks and going and asking the questions why and how. And then the future of innovation isn't just the med device professional. It's the kid down the street who knows 3D printing really well, and the kid who can build the app for you, or a friend who has good, or the AI can build a logo for your company. So you can be an innovator now and build a medical device startup and get it through pathways that used to take millions of dollars for a lot less, and obviously collaborate now more virtually. So it's an interesting time not just to think about the tech, but how do you collaborate and do things smarter, faster, and use generative AI to maybe design something for you, or even write your marketing material, or all those things are moving super fast, and this industry can help really shape that and cross collaborate with others.
Any other questions? Room for one more. Yeah, go ahead, Greg.
Just curious about any insights or color on devices or medtech for post-surgical infections.
Oh, well, one, that same company that does the urine dipstick and the camera for urinalysis, they have, and there's a couple companies doing that, which will look at a wound, you take a picture of it, you put a little marker there so it knows the size. And for example, for ulcers and bad prolonged wounds, they can track them really well and help the wound care nurse and now even the patient, do much smarter wound care, and what, the edge is red and it might be proactive and warn that there's an infection before it bubbles up to be sepsis. So that's the kind of example of proactive elements. A lot of folks travel, multiple hours, days after the surgery just to get that wound check. So I think kind of that remote monitoring piece and the AI analysis can help. Your wearable data. I had my flu shot a week or two ago, and I was knocked out, and my ring could show me my data was off. My heart rate variably went down. My temperature was up. My heart rate, and imagine, wound infections could be picked up by those digital biomarkers, whether it's from the camera, the voice, the wearable. So I think there's opportunities to look at data in new ways.
Is it possible to pick those up from, not being a doctor, but from, say, like joint replacement surgeries, for example?
I mean, I think a good example, a friend of mine is an orthopedic surgeon at UCSF. He runs a whole program called Digital Orthopedics. And he made this vignette of the future, which isn't so futuristic, but about things in the future. This is patient home. He's day 2 post total knee replacement. And he's talking to the chat bot, and it's giving guidance about what meds to take. And it notices his range of motion isn't so good. And it tells from the voice print that his pain's too high, and it gives him some more pain meds. And it recommends that he does some virtual physical therapy in the morning, and it sets the alarm for 7 a.m. It's like, 7 a.m., that's way too long, too early. So, okay, how about 9 a.m., and I'll set the coffee to go on for you, because it's connecting all the connected things. All those things are the integration of smart technologies. And for wound care or post-op care, you can tell when someone isn't what the average patient like them is doing. They're not walking as many steps, or their mobility, which can be picked up from their smartphone, isn't as great. Or the sensor now in some orthopedic devices can look at range of motion. So that can hopefully enable better care. And now they're doing alignments with lasers and such, so you don't have the one-size-fits-all alignment. So lots of examples of digital surgery and devices coming together. I was, as an aside, just at a digital neurosurgical conference out of Stanford a week or two ago. That whole space is blending with AI and machine learning and crowdsourced knowledge, and instead of wearing the loops, you wear an AR glasses with a microscope, and the microscope has AR guidance as well. And before they even do the aneurysm surgery, they can practice it because it's so unique in a VR environment, because those are very not one size fits all surgeries. So all those things are kind of coming together, and who do you choose for medical school? Hopefully someone who's not just good at organic chemistry, but someone who knows software and data and maybe can code. Some of those folks are building next generation solutions, and that all ties to the medtech world really intimately.
I meant to shadow you at some point. I don't know if I can keep up or not, but one thing you were talking about with the traceability of those devices to other devices, it almost sounds like creative connectivity is pretty important to understand the downstream effects of your device. One of the other things, well, any other questions first, I guess? We're almost out of time. I have 2 minutes, is that right? Okay. I lost my
What is your favorite color? It's blue.
Yeah. Last piece of advice. Any other last piece of advice to medtech professionals as they go out into the world? Because when I listen to you talk, I get really excited about the future, but I'm also reminded to keep one eye on the future, one eye on the horizon, one eye on the foot in front of you, because you can't forget about the things you're working on right now. What piece of advice might you have as we close?
Well, it is that the future's coming faster than you think, and I mentioned that one slide about Kodak and the blockbusters have gone bust. You don't want to be the next Blockbuster or Kodak. So what can you do in your individual role and through your company to go, well, what am I not looking at? What's, who's coming, disruption's an overused word, but who's coming to disrupt me? I guess the device world is, 3D printed braces. They disrupted the orthodontics world, for example. That came through the convergence of technology and 3D printing and software. So I maybe would go back to where's a problem that you're seeing in your area? How might you solve it differently? Maybe it's not exactly in your industry. You might have a colleague doing something quite different in the aviation world, and they might have lessons in crew risk management or heads-up displays that might apply to your device, or the surgeons or clinicians who are going to put it in, or the nurses are going to use it, or the patient who's going to need it at home. I mean, even many drugs, devices aren't used well because the instructions are kludgy. Now you can plan for the Apple Vision headsets or the Oculus 3s, and those might be tools in the office or at the home to get patients and their families engaged in using these devices in ways that really work, because I think there's an adoption gap as well. So I just, stay adaptive, have beginner's mind, and imagine the art of the possible. That's what I think would take you further, faster, and help you, win, and make better impact.
You said you're not a longevity nut. I can't imagine what one would actually look like. If it seems like you know a lot.
Like they take 50 supplements a day. Some of them make sense. There's this one guy who's getting transfusions from his kid, because there is some data about young factors in the blood, but there's a lot of noise in the space. We're actually going to be launching an X Prize in a couple months for health span, not longevity.
Okay.
So how do you even measure aging? Like, one of the things about all these new tools and technologies, they can measure things and outcomes that weren't measured before. The old endpoints for studies, whether it's for a device or a drug, can be shifted, right, and be measured in new ways. So if you are making a medical implant for a knee implant, maybe part of your endpoint for your trial is how many steps you're taking in the Fitbit. That could be part of your thinking on the outputs and quality of life measures that aren't the old school ones that were baked in from regulatory processes from a decade ago.
Very cool. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. Really appreciate you being
Sure.
here. Thank you.